7 o'clock, ready? Okay, we'll call the April 20th meeting of the regular council to order. Can you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, please.
Mayor David Allison,
Here.
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kathy Sherman,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
Kristen Carpenter,
Here.
Ken Jones.
Here.
It's a quorum of council.
Hey, we're all here, so regular agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Any discussion, changes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Any disclosures of conflicts of interest or ex parte communications? Hearing none, seeing none. Communications by and petitions for visitors. We don't have any guest speakers tonight, so open it up for audience comments regarding agenda items. Please come up, state your name, address, and the item you're talking about. Tell us your comments.
Okay. Kind of new to the process, so I apologize up front.
No worries.
All right, sounds like I've got approximately 3 minutes-ish.
Yeah, I'm not going to be too picky about that, but as long as you're reasonable. And please use the mic as much as you can. The people online can't hear us if we're not right up to the mic.
Okay, so good evening. My name is Steve Namitz. I'm the U.S. Forest Service District Ranger here in Cordova. And I'm here to speak to agenda item
19.
19. Thank you. So I'm not really sure where to start. So it's recently come to my attention that there is an amendment that was put forward by the Harbor Commission to add a floating net mending dock within the footprint of where the U.S. Forest Service has leased for the past 50 years and is in current and active negotiations with the city to pursue a new lease. So that was news to me. I feel a little disappointed that there wasn't a little more collaboration as we've been a partner in the harbor for a long time. And the Forest Service is really, I guess what I would say provides, kind of a public service. Our main focus is recreation, public access, and the conservation of fish and wildlife species. We're not a commercial business, and we've been here in Cordova since about 1907. So I feel that the agency has been a little bit misrepresented recently, and would be happy to answer questions and provide some additional information. The harbor is super important to us. We have 16 public use cabins, 40 miles of trail, probably another 40 miles of access within the sound through 17B easements. We manage 9 fish pass structures to enhance commercial fisheries within the sound. The agency, I've only been here about 3 years, but I think the agency has been a major partner and community partner for the city. I've been recently asked to provide letters of support for the harbor expansion and have participated and done so. So this seems a little disgenuine, I guess, without that kind of communication and collaboration. So I don't know where I am on my 3 minutes, but I'll be here all night and would happily answer any questions.
Okay, yeah, I'm not key. I'm new to this mayor thing as well, but I guess my philosophy is that if you get something to say and you're not repeating yourself 16 times, I'm not going to cut anybody off at 3 minutes. We're here to listen to the community, and that's what this time is for. And if there's something to say, we want to hear it.
Roger that. Thank you. So I guess in final closing, I would say that I would ask the council not to vote on that amendment. That would be my recommendation and position, as we're currently negotiating with the city on that spot. So I'll close with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other, come on up.
Hello, my name is Dave Zastro. I also work for the U.S. Forest Service. I've been working and living here for 30 years. I moved here in 1991. I'm the Recreation Lands Mineral Heritage Program Manager for the district. I'm just going to fill in maybe some blanks for Steve. I have been around for quite a few years. I've worked with lots of rangers over the years that have supported harbor expansion. We definitely support it. We always have. We provided letters of support throughout the years in order to see that get done. We've also participated in the grant process. The Forest Service has been cited as an organization providing diversity in the harbor in order to be able to get those funding dollars to be able to do harbor expansion. So we've certainly been proponents of that. I would say that this resolution amendment, whatever is before the council right now, there's probably a few things in there that certainly are worthwhile and will very likely come to pass and should. But again, it seems very disingenuous to just go ahead and have this body vote on something that's going to basically, it's kind of an end run to say you're going to vote on putting a net mending dock in a location where we're currently functioning right now. Yeah, it's kind of, it's basically saying we are no longer welcome in the harbor. And that's a hard thing to kind of take. So I would say that at least at this time, this should be postponed. This decision, as far as that part of this resolution, should be postponed. Again, the Forest Service has been a huge part of this community in how we manage the lands. We have our resources, both the terrestrial biology, aquatic biology, resource parts of our district that manage the entire Prince William Sound. It's not just what's in and around Cordova. They manage the entire sound from east to west. It's a huge area, and that's all done out of this harbor. Same thing with our recreation program and public access. That's all managed out of this harbor. A huge part of this district is really what's out there in the Prince William Sound. So it's a massive amount of work that we do, and without the type of facility we have here, we really couldn't get that done. We've been a partner, as Steve said, and Forest Service has been around a long time. We're not, we're just not another guy with a boat, right? We've got a variety of vessels that do different kind of work. You're going to probably hear from Andy. We've got a law enforcement vessel that does both safety and law enforcement and fills in the gaps for the lack of support that we sometimes get from other agencies, right? I mean, without Andy and that facility that he has with that boat, I think we'd all be a lot worse off. We have basically a research and operations vessel with the Tenacious that supports all kinds of work, taking crews out in the field, doing cabin maintenance, doing fisheries, fish pass maintenance, a variety of things. So again, a huge part of what we do is managed out of the harbor. The facility itself, I think, we sat in on multiple Harbor Commission meetings and Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. And I think some of the things that probably you council members might not know, that the facility that we're in right now, the lease that the Forest Service got, the 55-year lease, the Forest Service is only leasing intertidal zone land, mudflats. That facility down there was bought, installed, paid for, and maintained by the Forest Service. That's millions of dollars worth of infrastructure down there. And we just recently did a roof replacement a couple years ago, which was well over $100,000. So we are, we're investing in that space, and that's, obviously it's important to us because we spend that kind of money on it. We have been very open to any kind of negotiation with the city in order to find what might be a better location. All of the designs that I have seen that have come up about what the potential use of the North Harbor might be never has included a space for the Forest Service or even discussions with the Forest Service where we might see ourselves. No one's ever approached us to ask us what we felt might be an appropriate location for us. And so I would say the Forest Service isn't opposed to even moving from where we are now, but there are certain types of requirements we do have for the operations that we do now that we'd want to continue to do. So I won't go into those details. It's probably for another time. But again, I would just say that we're a willing partner. We want to be involved in negotiations on how the harbor will be renovated into the future, and just need to be involved. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Andy Morse. I'm the law enforcement officer at the Cordova Ranger District here. I've been in place almost 13 years as the LEO here. You may be familiar with my vessel, the patrol vessel Christine Fairbanks. That's in the water year-round down at the Forest Service dock. I'll just reiterate a few key points that I think are going to be problematic for the city, first off. So what we have here with this agenda item is, putting a net mending dock, which I'm not opposed to. I think that would be used, and we support, the Forest Service supports commercial fisheries. However, how does that feel when that net mending dock gets set directly in, the design is directly in the middle of the federal government's property on that dock? I mean, that's just problematic. Like, how can we come to some negotiation with that without being involved in the process? That I'm a good partner with the city. When the police department has a high risk arrest warrant, search warrant, guess who they call? They call me. I'm there all the time. I'm willing to help out. I help out the fire department and everything. I have a marked truck, a marked unit. I'm at my office. Not once. I show up Monday, and it's like suddenly the Harbor Commission has voted on this. Planning and Zoning has voted on this, and we were never even asked to sit at the table to have any conversation in this, and it just seems really disappointing, I guess, is what I want to say. And I don't think council's informed on some of the details on this, and I would just ask you to wait a month or whatever, we could go into some more negotiations. I mean, currently, we need to focus on the process. Whether it's the federal government and the process is slow or not, we're actively engaged in renegotiating the lease. I made that mistaking. That's out of my bailiwick. I don't have any control over that specific lease part, but we were very involved the 2 winters ago with planning and zoning. We went through this iteration with Mayor Copeland. We went through this. I thought it was resolved. You're going to hear a lot of things like we're willing. Without speaking, I can tell you, I understand we're not going to get a 50-year lease anymore. The harbor is going to change. We understand that. We're going to morph with that. But we need a seat at the table. We're willing to pay fair market value. We're not going to do anything for $1. I go to the fuel dock all winter long by myself. I would love a fuel dock in the harbor. That's not to say that when Shoreside speaks or whatever, like, great, we're all about that. But basically, it just seems a little like vindictive. It's almost like the Forest Service doesn't deserve any spot or say in this process. And it's like the Harbor Commission is just coming up with ways to export us out of there. I mean, we've been in town here since 1907, the foundation of Chugach National Forest, and had vessels in the harbor. So we're just asking for our space. We're kind of out of the way there. If dredging happens or whatever, we can move. But you know what? This doesn't have to happen, in my opinion, like today. That we're talking way down the line. So what I'd ask is just some more communication and some more time, and so we can have everybody on the same page before we make any rash decisions. And we're figuring out how we're going to move all the infrastructure we have there, because I'll reiterate, it's government property. That dock, the gangway, the building, that's all U.S. property. We're literally just asking to lease the mud to have our pilings in there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Mike Mickelson, 410 Railroad Row. I also agree that probably the time to decide on this isn't right now, but I would come at it from a slightly different angle. I've lived here my whole life and actually grew up commuting from Whiteshed, so I came to skiff to school every morning and saw there was not a lot of activity at that dock, and I think there's probably a way to meet the Forest Service's needs to do their job, but also provide net mending activity. You know, if you look at the last 4-acre report, 97 cents of every dollar here is either directly or indirectly from the commercial fishing industry. And, you know, that's a really prime piece of harbor real estate. And while I appreciate that the lease for $1 a year is for the mudflats, I think that, you know, we need to evolve. And if we've looked at what the fishing fleet has done in the last 30 years, it's a significantly different fleet. And so I think there is probably a way to move forward, and I would support postponing this. I also would support adding the 5-ton crane. I think the 1,500-pound crane that we have currently in several locations around the harbor is not really enough to deal with some of the things that we're dealing with as fishermen these days. We're having heavier nets, and a lot of that equipment is getting pretty old. And, you know, if you want to change an engine in your boat, for example, you have to check with the harbor to make sure that your engine isn't above the weight rating of the crane. And that's a huge public service for fishermen. And especially when we're on a tight timeline, you know, we don't want to sit around and try to round up a boom truck if it's 2 a.m. and you have an engine in your locker and you think you can get it changed before the next opener in 6 hours. So anyway, that would be my thoughts on that. I support a floating fuel dock. I support the pedestrian access around the harbor. And, you know, I support working with the Forest Service because I do agree they are an important part of our community. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Any other audience comments? Yeah, I'd just like to take just a second of executive privilege for the chair here, just to clarify a little bit of a misconception maybe on these maps. And the misconception was happening at the Harbor Commission and the Planning Commission, as well as here a little bit. The grant application is a conceptual issue, just like our South Harbor project. At this point in time, that's only a concept. Yeah, we've got a certain number of slips that we have to have. Yeah, we said we're going to have a drive-down dock, but the locations for that isn't set in stone. We're hiring a design-build team to come up with some designs, and that whole process can take place. And I would hope that the city has some kind of does a better job of involving the stakeholders a little bit more than maybe has happened with this North Harbor thing. But by the same token, the North Harbor, it's a concept. We're just, I think what they're asking for, and maybe the wording needs to be changed. I haven't looked at the exact wording of the resolution or whatever. Maybe that needs to be changed. But as I listened to the conversations, it wasn't necessarily, let's kick the Forest Service dock out, you know, remove that sucker and let them worry about where they're going to be. That wasn't the discussion at all. It was, we need a net mending. We're losing our net mending over here at the airplane float because we're making a drive down dock, and we are so we need to replace that somewhere. Now, I don't think the resolution should say that it's going in this spot in particular. You know, that's for the design build team to come up with a solution. And certainly the Forest Service should be, and I would hope will be, involved in those discussions. You know, those engineers can come up with some great ideas, and with the Forest Service input, I think a legitimate solution, a solution that everybody can be happy with, can happen. But we're not at that stage yet. We're just applying for a grant, and it's conceptual, and I don't think that grant should say anything about removing the Forest Service dock or putting it where the Forest Service dock is. It should just say we want a floating net mending dock, and as we get to putting it out for RFPs for our design build, make sure that those design build people are including the Forest Service and any other stakeholders for that matter, that are in that area of the harbor. So I don't know if that alleviates any of the concern at all. I know there's some concern, but this is a conceptual, and we're going to discuss that here a little bit later. And we are not at the design stage by any stretch of the imagination yet. There will be 100 things on this map that change before this project gets going. And there's a lot of time to be involved in that process. So anyway, with that said, let's see, chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. We got CCMC. Dr. Sanders?
Today.
Yeah, how nice to see you.
Hi, I'm Hannah Sanders. So the hospital continues to do really well. We just finished our federal, state, and life safety surveys 2 weeks ago. There were several findings on those surveys. Many of them had to do with the life safety code. It's an old building. We really struggle to keep up to current code. We're working on those things and getting those corrections in. We also struggle with staffing like everybody is right now with the pandemic and finding nurses and housing once we find people, getting them to stay because they're having a hard time finding housing. So that continues to be a big issue for the hospital. Our revenue is doing well. I'm really proud of the team there. We continue to be solvent and looks like we're going to be that way for the foreseeable future. So that's a big win for us. And I think that's all I have. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Sanders?
Thank you. I think we should applaud.
Anybody online have any questions, comments for Dr. Sanders? Hearing none, thank you. Okay, next up, school board. Is there a school board rep online or in the house? Well, for those of you that are online, we've got probably, 8 or 10 guests plus 5 or 6 staff here this evening in the audience. Student council rep, don't have a student council rep yet. So the consent calendar is before you. Anybody want to pull anything? Can you call the roll on that, please?
Tom Baylor on the consent calendar.
Yep.
Jeff Guard.
Yes.
Ann Schaefer.
Yes.
Kristen Carpenter.
Yes.
Ken Jones.
Yes.
Melina Meyer.
Yes.
Kathy Sherman.
Yes.
Consent calendar is approved.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a proclamation of appreciations here. If I can get Clay Copeland, Mayor, to come up and join us here. The glasses on.
Feel so comfortably being on the other side.
So, City of Cordova, Alaska, proclamation of appreciations to Clay Copeland. I, Mayor David Allison, do hereby issue this proclamation of appreciation to Clay Copeland for his countless valuable contributions to the City of Cordova while serving as mayor from 2016 through 2022. Whereas Clay Copeland ran for Cordova mayor in March of 2016 against a field of popular and well-respected Cordovans, and he won by a large margin without even need of a runoff election. And after 3 years, in March 2019, he selflessly gave of his time again and handily won another 3-year term. And whereas his dedicated leadership was evident from the beginning of his service as mayor, he excelled at competently chairing City Cordova Council meetings, ensuring public input was given and heard, directing council discussion in an organized and effective way, which led to good decisions for the benefit of all Cordovans. And whereas, as mayor, Clay Copeland championed Cordova's never-ending battle for better transportation service, namely the Alaska Marine Highway System, his efforts proved advantageous as ferry schedules in Cordova have become more consistent and overall status and downtime for Cordova ferries has decreased dramatically of late. And whereas Clay Copeland guided City Council through the unenviable task of searching for city managers twice during his tenure and handled the assignment successfully both times. And whereas as mayor of Cordova, Clay Copeland gave important encouragement to the Fisheries Development Committee, prompting the inception of a Prince William Sound tanner crab fishery. He wrote countless letters to state and federal legislators, granting agencies, business owners, commissioners, Alaska governors, and anyone else as asked to by the City Council in furtherance of projects and seeking solutions to problems as requests for budgets or other needs of the City of Cordova. And whereas Clay Copeland facilitated the healthcare collaboration that remains ongoing between CCMC and the native village of Eyak, he lobbied in Washington, D.C. and Juneau for Cordova's priorities. He worked with Cordova staff, committee members, and contractors towards the 2019 Cordova Comprehensive Plan update, and he led Cordova citizens and the incident management team through the challenging and unprecedented COVID-19 emergency as public information officer. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the mayor, city council members, city staff, and citizens of Cordova do hereby express their sincere appreciation to Clay Copeland for his willingness and ability to lead our city so admirably these several years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. And Lila as well.
Another volunteer, a whole room full of them. Thank you.
Here, Clay, you got your little, you can keep your key to the city. We won't change the locks quite
I
yet.
think I gave that back.
Just a little token of our appreciation.
Well, thank you all for what you do too. Thank you.
Okay, that moves us down to the mayor's report. I provided a written report in the packet. Update from that. There is a salmon harvest task force meeting today that we attended this afternoon. That went well, I think. My letter to the industry, fishing community is completed. It's been reviewed by the medical teams, and I will distribute that tomorrow. I've talked to 2 or 3 of the processors and let them know that it was on the way, but we will distribute those tomorrow by noon. And we've received, in addition to the public comments we've gotten tonight, we've received 11 emails. I think everybody got those today if you've checked your emails. 11 different emails supporting the harbor renovations. One was against the fuel dock side of things. So you've all received those, and those will be in the packet next meeting. But that is on the agenda for tonight to discuss, so that's why we included that. The last thing that I have is, as most of you are aware, Tom Carpenter has been appointed to the Board of Fish. He has a confirmation committee hearing from the House Fisheries and Resources Committee on Saturday morning at 10:30. If anybody wants to put in comments, or I believe they're taking written comments as well in support of Tom Carpenter for the Board of Fish, that would be a big benefit to Cordova to have him. He's certainly well qualified for that position. So with that, the other meeting that I attended, the Alaska Marketing Association, that was the AMA meeting last week, Friday afternoon, all afternoon. There must be 50 some members of that association. It's relatively new. They're hoping to get a bunch of millions from the state for operating that this year from the state, and it's likely that they will get that. They just went out for advertising for an executive director, but they quickly learned that it's pretty tough to have a regular meeting with 50 some members. You need 31 for a quorum, And we only had 22 to start the meeting, so we just, when you don't have a quorum, you just do information, you can't vote on anything. And then when 32 finally showed up, we went back and voted on everything. But their likelihood is that they're going to change to a more like a PISWAC or a CTC or a CEC, where the membership elects an executive board, and that executive board does the regular business and then meet once a year to elect new positions and do the business. And that probably makes sense. I'm not sure how the city got a membership with that, but they called Clay's name and I told him I was there instead of Clay. So anyway, that was what I was up to the last week. Any questions for me? Okay, then we'll move along to the manager's report.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I hope everyone in the community has taken the opportunity to get a little cardio in our new stairs that go from the harbor level up to Main Street on the south side of Cordova Center. It's been a long process of getting them done, and thanks to all that were involved, certainly from our team, Sam and Leif Stavik, who used to be our planner, but that is now a completed project, and it's a welcome addition to our town. We had a ribbon cutting over the weekend last week, and had a good attendance, and the fire department did a barbecue and was able to attract some folks who might be willing to volunteer for the volunteer fire department. So all in all, a very good event, and certainly we're going to have more of those sorts of events to come, I'm hopeful. Update on infrastructure symposium. We had staff members in attendance in Anchorage for a 2-day symposium where we learned about and connected with folks who are going to be instrumental in making sure that those funds are deployed in Alaska. So we've made some good connections there, and we'll continue to pursue those resources as they come available. A takeaway from that, though, is that it's very clear that there's two different types of funding, one of which is the competitive funding, most of which will be competitive funding coming through the feds. It will be incumbent on anyone who chooses to apply to have their act together, have really good, strong plans, well-developed, and have skin in the game. And that's going to be the challenge for small communities, is getting the match requirements of these competitive grants. There will be some funds that will be available and distributed through the state, but a much smaller pot of money, obviously. The proposal in front of you for consideration later in the agenda for the PIDP grant that staff is pursuing is to be competitive and to access some significant federal resources to improve that critical infrastructure in the harbor that makes it possible for us to operate our city and our industries. So that's that. We'll certainly keep you posted as things come up. Give a little legislative update. The session ends May 19th. We do have, and Louise Stutz, Representative Stutz, is championing our additional request for harbor. Right now we have a $7.5 million request in to cover the cost overrun associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the crazy cost increases that we're experiencing. That number is obviously not a guarantee until the final gavel is done. I think we have a reasonable assurance that the governor will not veto it, so it's a matter of getting it through the House and the Senate. Thank you to all in the community that wrote letters and or called in and testified when there was public comment requested around that support for that at the Senate Finance Committee a couple weekends ago. There probably will be other opportunities for that, and we will keep you guys posted. But I am tracking it very, 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 very closely, and I have contacts that are keeping me informed when things are looking scary or if pressure is needed. So I will keep all of you informed, and all we can do at this point is cross our fingers. On the good note, though, right now the operating budget is making its way through. It's gone through House and Senate, and it looks as though there'll be 100% school bond debt reimbursement for the first time in several years. and that there'll be an increase in the revenue sharing. Again, those numbers won't be known until after May 19th, but there is positive indications that that's going to happen. So, and then the final thing is our team is working with the Native Village of EAC on a housing work group, and EAC Corporation has now been brought into that team, and I think we have a really strong group of folks who have different leverage points to bring resources to the table and make something happen. So to Dr. Sanders, who has left, and others who are very well aware of our housing issues here in Cordova, there's a strong team working on it. And with that, I will pass this back to Mayor Allison.
Okay, any questions for the manager?
Yeah, I do have one.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Kristen.
Thanks. I had a question. So I think I'm asking because it's the manager's report, and I think it might be something to talk about with staff, but Cordova Cleanup Day is coming up on Saturday. I spend a lot of time running on Orca Road, and I go past the boatyard every time, so 3 times a week, and there's a lot of trash that gets blown across the road. So I see 5-gallon drums, I see 1-gallon oil containers, woven poly bags, all kinds of food containers. And I would love to see if the harbor staff could do a little more to encourage people to manage their trash in the boatyard, because I don't think it's super fair to let the trash get blown over there and then ask volunteers to go out and clean it up. So I just mentioned that as something that maybe you guys could brainstorm on a little bit.
Great.
Thanks.
And our harbor master is here nodding his head. So, you know, a lot of it, I think, also is winter happens and
Yeah.
things emerge.
Yep.
And, but it still is incumbent on all of us as citizens to pick up after ourselves. So hopefully we can do that. Thank you. There's a written report on the South Harbor rebuild. I don't know if anyone has any questions beyond the written report, but Sam is here if anyone has any questions about that.
Any other questions for the manager or on the South Harbor? And on the line, anybody speak up if you have something to say? Okay, not hearing anything, so we'll move along to the city clerk's report. There's a written report in the packet.
I don't have anything to add.
I guess I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
For the city clerk's report, I'm not sure if you know this, Tina, but for the elections to be eligible to vote in the primary on June 11th, by when do you need to register?
I'm not exactly sure. I did look at that today, and you can use that link to that website. It gives you some really good information.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll get that answer. Yeah, because that election is when, in June?
June 11th.
June 11th?
Yeah, and it's a mail.
It's a mail, so I think probably the registration would have to be earlier than that.
Yeah, because I think they're mailing here pretty quickly.
Okay. I know there's
Maybe
just
like
new
next
people in
week.
town, so
Right.
getting that word out to register soon.
Yep. I think it registers you automatically with the dividend now, doesn't it? Does it still? If you apply for a dividend, you
Not sure.
get
I
registered.
think it does. I think you have to opt out.
Yeah, you have to opt out of it. It does by default, so, yeah. Okay, staff reports are in the packet. Any questions on any of those? Hearing none, then we'll move along to the correspondence. Got a letter from the Navy. Chamber of Commerce, they are actively busy and appreciate their partnership. Letter from Beadle supporting the preschool program. And the cleanup day notice is there this Saturday, 10 to 12, right? Yeah. And notice of open comment period for the Prisoner Sound Area Contingency Plan. Any comments on any of that? Okay, moving on then. Page 30 now at 2 of the packet.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I move to approve Resolution 0422-14, supporting the North Harbor Port Infrastructure Development Program 2022 grant concept as presented for grant application.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Do we have a presentation?
Yes, we do. And also, I just want to, for the record, and in acknowledgement of the Forest Service's concerns, communicate that at every step of the way, we have been talking about the possibility of moving the Forest Service and our commitment to relocating and providing like kind. And I just want to read something from a May 25th of 21 email that was going back and forth. So this is not a new conversation. And it says, midstream, the draft lease sticks as closely to the city's uniform lease model as possible. It also incorporates provisions protecting the Forest Service's access to property that meets its needs while also preserving the council's ability, the city's ability, to substitute the parcel for another in the event the city needs the property at issue for its harbor expansion project. Given the city's potential to relocate the Forest Service before the end of the lease term, and that all Forest Service does for the community, the draft lease we are proposing eliminates any substantial base rent and instead treats the removal and relocation of the improvements or the city's potential to retain those improvements upon relocation as consideration for the lease. While council must approve a lease for less than fair market value, we're hopeful that we can work something out. So again, it has been communicated without equivocation at all that we will likely need to do something in the harbor. We don't know because we don't yet have a plan. As of now, we're starting to move in that direction, but we are working and have been working closely with the Forest Service on a new lease with the understanding that moving their facility might and probably would be an inevitability. So I just share that with you because I just want everyone to understand that, at no point do we want to, dislocate and move and make them, the Forest Service, try to find a brand new place. We are going to be very engaged and involved, and any lack of communication at this moment in time is because this has recently emerged as a solution within the last, 2 weeks?
As of last Wednesday.
As of last Wednesday. So I do appreciate the kind of surprise that's been expressed, but I think also acknowledging that this has sort of been a big part of the conversation we've had with the lease. So with that, I also want to share that this plan as being presented now for council is exactly as Mayor Allison communicated. It's to make us eligible for a grant application. It is a plan. It can be changed. It can be adjusted. The PID grant has a very long lead time. We're going to apply, we'll get notice, and then there'll be probably a long period of time while we finalize and make sure everything is right before we can even get the funding. And then we'll have to go out for RFP and do bidding. So we're talking probably a 3-year time frame anyway. This is not an imminent Forest Service has to move. So we do have plenty of time to make any kind of adjustments that we need to, and to work directly with the Forest Service to find a solution that works for all. So with that, I want to turn over to Kevin Johnson, our planner, and Curtis Fincher, who is working on our special project team on the harbor rebuild, and they're going to do a presentation. And again, this presentation now is not about the South Harbor. It's about a next possibility for funding that will allow us to complete infrastructure improvements that will better support the industry, and that will be on the north side. So with that, have at it.
So I want to start the presentation by couching this discussion in a broader context. I imagine most of you have heard about the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Kristen definitely has. She was in Anchorage with us last week. It's anticipated to bring $17 billion to Alaska in the next 5 years. That comes out to $25,000 per Alaskan, which is a pretty staggering fund. As Helen referenced in her city manager's report, about half of those funds are to be awarded via competitive grants like PIDP, and almost all of those grants are essentially pay to play, which means that you need to have some skin in the game as an applicant. You need to have a match to be eligible. I say this because I don't think this is the first time staff will, or the only time staff will be coming before this council in the next few years asking for matching funds for projects. The next 5 years represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Cordova to catch up on deferred maintenance, to fix what we need to fix, and to build what we want to build to set us up for success in the next 40 years as a community. So one of those competitive programs is the Department of Transportation's Port Infrastructure Development Program, which has a really horrible acronym, PIDP. PID's main focus is increasing safety and efficiency of transportation of goods to and from a port. That to and from is important. It's not necessarily in a port, and that's why most of this concept, or a significant chunk of it, actually addresses the uplands around our North Harbor as opposed to the harbor basin itself. What's really exciting is under the infrastructure bill, PID's funding has tripled. This is pretty incredible because last year they were able to fund about half of their applicants. If they received the same number of applicants this year, they would have $250 million. They had nothing to put toward a project. So this is a really, really strong year for us to be putting an application forward. We first applied for PID last summer, and that concept was largely what's presented here, minus the fuel dock, and with the addition of the South Harbor rebuild that was funded by our, or partially funded by our DOT raise application. In March, we received a debrief on that application, and probably the biggest strike against us that Merid staff alerted us to was that we had already received $20 million from the DOT for an overlapping project. So our success is actually what largely counted against us. That said, we were able to catch up with Merid staff in Anchorage last week. They remembered this project. They even remembered Breakwater Avenue, the name of the street, which I was pretty amazed by. And they were particularly excited by that final bullet point, which is that our environmental permitting for this project, with the exclusion of the fuel dock permitting, is being rolled into our South Harbor environmental permitting. So that will already be done by the fall, and it makes this project essentially shovel ready, which is a huge attractant for funders. So these two photos show what's really the heart of the PID application. On the left, you have Breakwater Avenue, which is built on, you guessed it, a breakwater. That breakwater is shifting, settling, spitting out stones, and as it does that, it's eroding the road surface above it. You can see the curb stops, or whatever those things are called, are already missing from a decent chunk of that street. That forces fishermen to park further back into Breakwater Avenue, particularly fishermen with extended cab pickup trucks, which is many of them. They then obstruct Breakwater Avenue, which is reasonable given that there's no other choice other than put your pickup in the harbor. And that blocks all the freight traffic that also uses Breakwater Avenue, which is a major freight artery for our canneries, taking product to and from market. As if that wasn't bad enough, it's also a major pedestrian right-of-way for the 1,000 or so cannery workers that come to Cordova each summer, many of whom are housed in the North Fill and who use that road to get to and from town on foot. So the core of this application is to increase freight efficiency by getting pedestrians out of the roadway and providing somewhere for fishermen to park. With that said, Kevin, our planner, will walk all of you through the concept in a little more detail.
Yeah, thank you. So just give you a rundown of the main points of the concept and the process that we've been going through. Staff started working on a concept back in February once we received that debriefing from last year's grant process that we went through. We took that information, started making adjustments to the concept. We then started going through a public vetting process, which included multiple Harbor Commission meetings. The Harbor Commission made adjustments and changes to the plan. They then passed a resolution requesting the council support the concept. That was brought forward to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission forwarded that same recommendation onto the council. So just like I said, touch on the main points of this. Obviously, the sheet piling and backfilling of that to create additional uplands, which will fix a lot of the issues with Breakwater Avenue. It increases the parking area, and there would also be the creation of some commercial lease area. The concept for the plan for the lease area in this first phase, well, I guess this grant is that we would be stubbing utilities just to these locations. There'd be no construction of any structures at this time. So in the short term, they could be used for, food trucks or small business enterprises. And then looking forward to the future where we could then potentially get brick and mortar establishments that would be able to lease those spaces. So there's also the addition of 3 cranes, the floating fuel dock, electrical and fire suppression upgrades to the North Harbor float system, as well as a net mending float to help replace the loss of the airplane float in the South Harbor project. So this North Harbor area would be tied to the South Harbor through a boardwalk that runs along the uplands. It goes under the reluctant Sky Bridge and then comes down Railroad Avenue. There would then also be repairs to the 3-stage dock, as well as an addition of a new boat ramp in the space between the existing ramp dock and the 3-stage. Next slide. So with that, Harbor Commission did add the net mending float with the suggestion of it being located where the Forest Service float is. Obviously, if that was to move forward, that would create we would need to relocate the Forest Service. So staff got together, looked at possible locations, and we met with the Forest Service on Monday, as this was obviously short notice for us as well, since this was a concept that was just thrown in last week at Harbor Commission. So we talked with them, showed them that there are possibilities in the North Harbor as well as the South Harbor, the possibility of partnering with the state at their dock, while they could continue to lease the building that the space where their building is occupying. And we could also reserve space in the North Harbor for the potential for a dedicated Forest Service dock to be built in the future. So with that.
Okay, so back to matching requirements. The total cost of the project as that was just scoped by Kevin is $33.1 million. PIDP requires a 20% non-federal match, but lucky for City of Cordova, private investment counts toward that match. That is a major motivator for bringing the floating fuel dock into this concept. In that case, the fuel provider will be providing essentially $3.7 million of matching funds that the city does not in turn need to provide, in addition to all the other benefits of a safer, more environmentally friendly fuel dock inside the harbor. I will note that MARAD staff made it very clear that we lost points last year because we submitted the bare minimum 20% match that is required of us. They said that placed us in the bottom quintile of applications, which is as low as you can go. There's essentially a linear relationship between how much skin we have in the game and our likelihood of receiving this award. And so I would invite council to consider what this project is worth to the city, as opposed to necessarily funding it with a bare bones minimum. We're requesting $2.7 million at the moment. That is, as you'll see, a higher number than what's in your packet. That's because we were not able to receive a cost estimate for the net mending float portion of this project before the council packet was due last week. And this $2.7 million does include that. I would also like to quickly note that at least 3 major expenses that are absorbed by this project, the city will inevitably need to pay for in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years at the outside. The big one is that Breakwater Avenue sloughing. We're going to need to solve that some way. It's the largest single line item in this grant at $7 million. Next to that, there's the North Harbor electrical pedestal replacement. Currently, a number of users in the North Harbor are getting free electricity. It's not really free. The harbor's paying for it. That needs to be fixed. And the 3-stage dock repair, which is over $500,000, That funding was secured via 2016 Pink Salmon Disaster Relief Funding, but the South Harbor Rebuild team has siphoned that money over to the South Harbor Rebuild Project to help with that funding gap, which leaves that critical piece of infrastructure still in need of repair. So these two graphs, on the left, we have a pie chart showing the total $33.1 million of the project. 2.7 of that would be absorbed by the city if we were to offer a 24% match. 24% is obviously very slightly above the 20% minimum. That is to allow us some room as these cost estimates continue to solidify. And also, it looks better than the absolute bare minimum of 20. Again, I think 24%, given the $33 million of infrastructure that's available here, I think it's possible for council to offer a higher number than 24%. The $3.7 million comes from the fuel provider. You'll see in the line item budget that's been passed out tonight, that's the cost of their floating fuel dock. This project, as a part of the larger grant, would also would save them significant money and motivate them to do it. And then lastly, the lion's share on the left, the 26.7, is absorbed by the feds. On the right, what I've labeled use-specific construction costs is essentially we've gone through the budget here, and where a line item is shared by both, whether you want to term it general obligation or city or uplands, and the harbor, we have not counted that. Sheet piling would be the most obvious example of that. It's beneficial to the city to repair that road. It's also beneficial to the harbor to increase parking and reduce costs of the North Harbor float rebuild in 15 years by being able to slam the floats against that bulkhead and open up more slips in the basin, as P&D planned with the South Harbor concept as well. The distribution between the two as it worked out was about 60-40. So 60% of the budget is harbor related, 40% is uplands related. If we multiply that by those ratios by the $2.7 million match requested, we'd come up with 1.1 million city, 1.6 million harbor. If the net mending float was not included in this, it's very close to 50-50. It would be 1.1 million city, 1.15 million harbor. An additional slide that I think is important here is just in the last few days, the South Harbor Rebuild team commissioned a rate study for the Harbor Enterprise Fund back in February. That rate study was commissioned because we need it to open up the $2 million DEC Clean Water Fund loan, as well as the $5 million bond. Those lending agencies want to see a professional cash flow analysis of the harbor to ensure it's solvent enough to pay off that debt. And we've just, in this week, gotten a very rough draft of that back. I'm sure the document will be coming before all of you at some point, but this seemed relevant enough that I wanted to include it here. The gist of it is extremely positive, and I think it's encapsulated in that underlined line. Based on the raised grant funds awarded for the South Harbor reconstruction, it being the South Harbor Enterprise Fund, is in a strong position. And what the South Harbor rebuild team, so Tony and Sam and myself have been discussing, is how to use that strong position to be proactive and proactively plan the harbor's future. I'm sure all of you in this room have heard people bemoan how poor condition the harbor is in for how reliant we are on our commercial fishing fleet. And this $20 million raise grant was really the leg up we need to proactively plan for the harbor our fishermen want to have. So in closing, the infrastructure bill, again, is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build toward Cordova's future, and you will likely be seeing more match requests in the next few years. We've sought to dovetail the PID concept here with community needs as outlined in the comprehensive plan and Harbor Commission meetings, with PID scoring criteria to give us the best chance of getting it. A higher match increases application competitiveness. It's that simple. As Kevin has outlined, there are alternative Forest Service locations, and the grant is due May 16th. I want to touch on that a little bit. It was due mid-July last year. We were actually working on this application before the notice of funding opportunity and the deadline were even submitted. They They moved it forward 2 months because of statutory deadlines to expend federal infrastructure funding, which is why this whole process, I'm sure, feels very rushed to all of you. It certainly feels very rushed to me because I'm working a lot. But the upside of that abbreviated process is that it's due to the fact that the feds are pushing out so much money so quickly that they need to keep spending it and keep moving it out the door. So as long as we can stay on track for that May 16th application, whether that's with or without the net mending float included, I think we have a really strong chance to get these funds and position our whole harbor between this project and the South Harbor rebuild just in a great place for the next 40 years. Thanks.
And I just want to add one quick thing to their presentation, and it does get back to opportunity. We have the opportunity now to go as big as we can within reason, because there's a lot of capacity issues also, but because we are working the South Harbor and we hoped will segue into the North Harbor, there's some efficiencies that can be gained by this. So we just have to move, and this is a really, we could apply again next year, but we would lose a lot. Let's just put it that way. And I think the resources are available now, and the pot will get smaller as it's spent down by applicants. So I think we feel pretty strongly that this is our opportunity to get one of these awards, knock on wood, and are really hopeful that we can get the support we need from the community. And that includes fishermen and the Forest Service and City Council to say, yes, this is the kind of project we want to pursue. We think it's important for our community. So our goal is to make sure everyone feels reasonably comfortable with the A plan. And again, this is to get us competitive for a grant. If it's awarded, there'll be a lot of conversations, as evidenced by what we have been going through in the last 7 or 8 months with Ray's. We're still working on a design, and things have changed, and likely will with this type of grant application. But again, this is early stage. We just want to get the money.
Okay, Melina?
I had a question about one of the slides that you said, the 40% uplands and 60% harbor, and then it said city 1.3, I think, and then harbor. Was that for the match? Was the idea having the city of Cordova put in 40% and then the harbor users make up the other?
I would say that, I mean, that's obviously up to this council, but I was presenting that distribution of how the funds are being used in case that was the route you wanted to go. Yeah.
We're not asking, though, at this point for a commitment of funds. We're asking for a commitment in concept that city will somehow or another figure out a way to pay for a match. And the match that we put in a budget will be what is obligated to city if it's awarded. So if they award less than the, let's say we apply for 33 million and they only give us 25 million, our match will then go down accordingly. So that number is not known until we actually get an award and there's actual percentage that we know we have to commit to.
Questions on the presentation, not on the thing in general. Melina, have more follow-up to that?
No, I forgot.
Ann?
I'll hold.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If there's questions on the presentation, we can do that. Otherwise, Councilmember Jones, you made the motion, so go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a quick question for the presentation before I get into the reason why I made the motion.
Sure, go ahead. They're still here.
Okay. So I guess I wanted to ask staff that that the net mending float, even though it was a last minute addition, does that strengthen the application? Could you embellish on that?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question, actually.
Does that strengthen the application? Does it provide anything for points or anything like that?
Yeah, I ran some rough numbers based on skipper wages, which is published by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For our benefit cost analysis, the net mending float would need to save 1,250 hours a year to break even in the benefit cost analysis. I think that probably seems a little low, so it would likely strengthen it. For perspective, the drive down dock submitted in the RAISE grant was over 10,000 hours a year saved. And PID also has a significant focus on safety. And as anyone who's walked around the docks with nets on them, that would likely also score us a few points there. That said, if there were a location for the net mending float in another place, I mean, you'd have those same benefits without the other costs. So.
That answer your question, Councilmember Jones?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the presentation?
I do have a question.
Kristen?
Thanks. I realize the drawing is conceptual, but I just wanted to, I guess, make a note or ask for consideration of where all that parking is for some kind of stormwater runoff filtration to be incorporated into that design, because it just seems like there's a lot of new parking added, and right now all of that runoff goes right through the culverts and straight into the harbor. And I don't know if anybody else has looked in the gutters when it rains, but there's an awful lot of sheen in there, so anything that we could do to mitigate stormwater runoff if we have the chance to do new infrastructure would be great.
I will say we have $385,000 budgeted for uplands drainage, but that's all I know.
Yeah, I realize this is a concept drawing. I just thought, you know, if a note could be made and the next time you talk to the engineers or something, something could be talked about. Thanks.
And I remember my question.
Okay, go ahead.
So for this grant application, you just need to have a concept and then they award you a certain amount. So the conceptual drawings and nailing things down can change, or how much leeway does this grant allow for changing, say, if costs got more expensive and we had to narrow it down to our top items?
I think changing costs is reasonably difficult, at least in one direction. As for changing locations of things, that's fairly easy because you're accomplishing the same outcomes and they understand that what you're presenting is a conceptual. Yeah.
One of the things, and just to build on that, one of the things that we're struggling with our RAISE grant is we applied for $25 million and we got 20. And the cost of the project went up by 10. And RAISE has been rather exasperatingly difficult to work with to help us with that $10 million problem. So their initial response, well, if you have to cut your project, we'll just cut your grant award, which of course is like the never-ending story of, yeah, no, we don't want to go there. So they're allowing a certain number of things. We have to create white papers. We have to create explanation. My guess is that right now they just haven't caught up with the fact that costs are spiraling upwards, and they are going to come up with some kind of a solution for that. We just are in that first group that was awarded a grant before COVID craziness in the price department hit. And I'm going to guess, from what I've been led to believe, that they will come up with some solutions. So to answer your question, if there were cost differences in things, right now they're very rigid, but I'm going to guess that there might be some more understanding as we move forward, because everyone's in that boat, everyone.
Okay, let's debate the motion. How about that? Councilmember Jones, you made the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've obviously been very passionate about the harbor and have been a proponent of this project for a very long time. This project has been, it's not sprung up new, just the opportunity has come along very quickly. This has been talked about for over 10 years. There's a harbor master plan that has been around. I think we approved it in 2012 or 2013, and it, outlined that we wanted to do some general expansion into the area, including the Science Center location and the Forest Service dock. That has been, on the public record for over 9 years. We, have been working towards this for a very long time, starting with the relocation of the Science Center. And that whole project is finally, it's an amazing building, and they're going to be moving into it. And so this is our opportunity to go in, tear that all out, dredge it, and make it into something that's going to benefit our fleet long into the future. And there's all these other benefits that we can reap off of being able to leverage that private investment. I think this is a slam dunk. I think the city can easily afford this. We can, we have room to move our harbor rates up to help pay for it. We have spent more than this on dump equipment and trucks and sand sweepers over the last 3 years. So I would really urge council to support this. It's something that the fleet needs, and a lot of the people at this table, including myself, ran off supporting fishing, supporting our fleet, and supporting our harbor. And I'm just going to ask the council puts their vote where their mouth is and support this as written. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Carpenter, I think you made the second.
I did, thank you. So yeah, I am in strong support of the North Harbor project. I do want to ask that I understand that these drawings are conceptual, and the way they've been presented to us from PN&D, they've got certain notes on them, which I would really like to see removed, and I would like to see some kind of stamp or label saying conceptual drawing only, so that it's clear that these could change. And I don't know that the grant reviewers, that there's any value to them seeing Harbor Commission updates. I mean, obviously, they're going to be looking at what's in there, but I don't know if that makes a big difference to the grant review folks at DOT. And I would like to see something added back in to show the Forest Service dock and to say that this is a facility that will be included in the final design somehow. It won't necessarily be in that place, but that's why I think it's important to label it that this is a conceptual design, because we know it could change, but this is showing the features and the infrastructure improvements that we're after. So I would like to see that done for the design drawings that get submitted with this, which is due May 16th. And I would also like to propose an amendment to the motion. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In the seventh whereas, I'd like to delete the phrase, delete comma after float, and delete in the approximate area currently occupied by the Forest Service float. Just delete that phrase. So it's not saying that the net mending is going to stay or is going to replace the Forest Service, but it's just specifically saying that we're not removing that, not implying that we're removing it.
May I just make a comment, because the more complete the plan appears to the DOT, the better.
Yeah.
So if there looks to be some question, we can always make adjustments, but we don't want to appear to not have a notion of what we're doing.
Right.
So I guess I'm a little nervous around appearing to not know what we're talking about. Maybe it's just a matter of saying we are committed to making sure that the Forest Service has a place in the harbor too, and maybe that's a whereas instead, so that it isn't about where it is, it's about that the city is committed to making sure that the Forest Service has a working space in the harbor. If that would be something you might want to consider.
Sure.
Okay.
Did you second that? Was there a second? Was there a second?
For the motion to amend?
Yeah.
Yes, I would second that. And Are you
Okay,
finished?
go ahead on your amendment.
I think those are my comments, yeah, thank you.
Kathy?
So I would also propose that we increase the commitment of city funds to, I'm going to throw something out there, but I'm willing to go with the team, but I was going to say 3.7 million in city funds. Because I know,
Second.
thank you, I know having a commitment in the game or having skin in the game made all the difference for the Cordova Center. And they see those numbers, they see you're committed, they see we're partnering with Forest Service, with the fishermen, all our groups, and this is a go for broke time. I just think we need to jump while the iron's hot.
So was that an amendment to the amendment?
Amendment to
Or you
the,
want to just handle that separately? Let's handle that separately.
let's handle the money separately, I think, yes.
And can somebody with a calculator calculate what that would make our percentage? 28 or whatever.
I just want to make one cautionary statement, if I may, please. There are other projects that are going to need match above and beyond this. So just being cognizant of the fact that we do have a pot of money that we can use. We are actively applying for a new public safety building that will have similar matching requirements, 20% plus. So I'm just sharing that this isn't the end of our ambition here for you all. And you will need to have resources to make those matching commitments.
I'm pretty sure it's not the end of our ask either. We've got states that can match the feds.
Well, I would just comment that I'm very aware of that, and I'm going to push for the public safety building next, but I just see this as a golden opportunity for us to really get our feet on the ground in our community with our infrastructure.
Okay, so we're talking about removing that one, the second half of that sentence.
So I think the amendment is to remove that one phrase, and then staff will word another whereas to specify that the Forest Service facility will be included in the final design.
Could you tell me what you're removing again?
It's,
You get it?
After the seventh, was that the seventh?
Yeah, the seventh whereas, and then after the comma after float,
Okay,
take out the
and
comma.
insert another whereas, leaving it to staff to put the words in there? Is that what you're saying?
I think we should probably have those words. Maybe we can just do that quickly. If you're going to approve this tonight, it should be.
Well, I think it pretty much has to be done tonight
Yep.
if they got to submit the grant.
You don't need to put something in on the Forest Service I think there's general indication that that's what you want. It isn't needed for the grant. It's really more about making sure that everyone understands your level of commitment to the Forest Service and making sure that they have adequate facilities in the harbor.
I'm just trying to think of what, I know it's in the record for the discussion tonight, but I just want there to be something that is on the record that says we will make sure that they are in the final plan.
We could also do that as a separate resolution at some point in the future.
maybe that comes as a part of the lease discussion
Okay.
as we move forward.
Yeah,
So the where,
Mayor?
hang on, the managers.
I just want to make sure, so the 1, 2, 3, the 6 is whereas construction of a net mending float will greatly improve. That's how it will read, correct? Okay.
Right. And that's all we're discussing at this point in time. Yeah, Councilmember Jones?
Yeah, so I guess I just want to remind council that this was unanimously supported by the Harbor Commission, and Harbor Commissioners are nominated and confirmed by City Council to be kind of the city's experts on this type of thing. And, you know, this was evaluated and chosen as the ideal location. It's been talked about for years. And I'm going to oppose this amendment. I think that location is the best spot to put a net mending float. I think that the Forest Service can be accommodated, and I want to see them accommodated. We're not trying to kick them out. We can give them priority parking elsewhere in the harbor. We can keep their building where it is. we can you can move the float around the corner a little bit and make room for a net mending float. There's all these different options that we talked about at the Harbor Commission meeting. And I feel like that spot is the best spot for a net mending float. And I would just urge the council to just support this as written. Let's get this grant application put in, and we can accommodate them elsewhere. We can have a workshop. I've been calling for a workshop for years. So, yeah.
Kristen?
Yeah, I would say that removing that clause doesn't preclude the net mending float from going there. It just means that we're going to do some more planning work. I mean, we're just not, anyway, that's.
Any other discussion, Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that removing that clause doesn't mean the net mending float can't go there. It just might provide us, I mean, we have flexibility because this is all conceptual, and we don't necessarily know the best spot for the net mending float or the Forest Service right now because it's all conceptual and there hasn't been a lot of design and planning and, communication with the community and stakeholders about this. So I think I'm in support of removing that clause.
Okay, online, Councilmember Guard, do you have any questions, comments on the amendment? We're talking on the amendment right now.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Schaefer on that. This is all just concept right now, for now. Stuff can be moved around forever. This may very well be the best place for the net mending float. But I don't want to write anything in stone any earlier than we have to on this, because we certainly haven't done enough planning as a community. I understand there's probably been lots of work done at the Harbor Commission level, and very people for it, but there's still a lot of planning that needs to be done with a project like this. So I'd just like to make sure that the Forest Service knows that we're not dissing them, we're not kicking them out, we're not running them out. We want to make sure that their needs are all fulfilled here while we're planning to facilitate everybody else's needs that we can in this also. So I'm in favor of removing that clause.
Okay, Councilmember Baylor?
Well, I guess I would side with the Harbor Commission and the city manager on this one. I think sometimes less is more, but they've got this in there. I think there's no question that we're going to have to make accommodations for the Forest Service. That can be done, that will be done. I think we should leave with this written and move it forward.
Any other comments? Councilmember Meyer?
I guess I'm looking.
Hang on, Ken, we'll get Meyer first and then you.
I guess I'm looking for a little clarification on this amendment. Is it on the city draft on page 40, the Harbor Commission updates? Is it that note where it says remove Forest Service float and replace it with net mending boat float? Because in the drawings, I don't really see the net mending on there at all, except on that same page where it says net mending float not to scale, and that's on the other side of the harbor. So I guess I'm a little confused.
The resolution on page 35, it's the 7th whereas.
But that one doesn't have a.
Page 40 does have the net mending net mending float.
Occupied. Okay.
Just to get the location out of it.
Okay, that clears it up for me a little bit. I was a little confused. I guess I also have a question of, are these conceptual drawings the ones being submitted?
Yes. It won't have the Harbor Commission note updates on it. It'll just be the map. I'm going to let these guys answer your questions.
Yeah, I just want to clear that up. Because of the quick turnaround time between the Harbor Commission meeting, the Planning Commission meeting, then having to get the packet in, we did not have a chance to get the changes to the engineer, the P&D. And so what here is the concept that you would be approving, but it would be polished up before actually submitting.
Okay.
And it won't include all the sidebar notes. Those were for your benefit.
Yeah, great.
Okay, yeah, that was a little bit of concern of mine. I didn't think that it looked all that great for a grant application, so, okay, that clears it up, thanks.
Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, I guess to take a second crack at it, you know, this isn't new. It's been talked about for a long time. Initially, we talked about putting in a floating fuel dock there. Then we said, oh, well, you know, maybe we can fit them both in there somehow. And, oh, maybe we can fit a crane. And, you know, to say that there's no planning done on this, I think is a disservice to the structure of the city commissions. And you're devaluing all of the work of the harbor commissioners and the planning commission members. This was passed by both commissions as written. This has been vetted through public meetings. This idea has been around for years. Like you alluded to earlier, Kristen, you want something on the record. Well, this has been talked about for years, and that's exactly why we put it in here, is because we wanted something on the record saying we want them to have any floats in this location. So I just urge council to vote this amendment down and pass this as written.
Okay, any other comments on the amendment before we vote? Okay, let's do a roll call on the amendment.
Okay, as amended. Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Ken Jones,
No.
Kristen Carpenter,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes?
Tom Baylor,
No.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Melina Meyer.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2.
Okay, back to the resolution or the motion as amended now. The appropriate time to talk about monies or other things, other amendments that people might have. Councilmember Sherman.
I jumped my gun, I guess. So I would like to see us agree on a number that is bigger than 2.25 million to enter into the resolution. And my suggestion was 3.7. Thank you, Ken.
Did you say a number?
3.7.
Okay. Did you have any further comments other than that?
No, I think
On it.
I've said my piece.
Okay, Councilmember Jones?
Yeah, I kind of already spoke to this. You know, this is an enterprise fund. The enterprise can pick up, you know, quite a bit of this cost. There has been a rate study. Sorry. Yeah, we can afford this. This is a slam dunk. We need to be investing in our waterfront infrastructure, and I was personally going to make an amendment to raise this amount up to give us a better chance at this grant award, and appreciate Council Member Sherman doing so.
Okay, Councilmember Baylor on upping the amount to 3.7.
Yeah, I'd support it.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yeah, I also support it. I think that it has been very beneficial in other grant matching opportunities we've had. Second Street, we did that. We went above and we got that right after we got the stairs before that. So I think it's been beneficial and worth city's time when we up it a little bit more than all the time they put into it, actually getting awarded rather than being turned down each time. So I support it.
Councilmember Carpenter?
I have a question. Is this proposed to come out of, this? The 3.7 would come out of the Harbor Enterprise Fund?
It would be proportional. I think it was 60% harbor, 40%
I see.
city.
Okay, that was the 60/40, yeah. Okay.
I think that's another meeting to negotiate or to banter about. We would be committing here in the conceptual to the 3.7
Okay.
match, but how that 3.7 is, where that comes from isn't decided yet.
Right. Well, it seems like potentially there are going to be some annual operating savings from doing these improvements if we're not paying for electricity for certain users and other things, so that could help offset the increase.
Councilmember Guard.
I'm in support of this. Does anybody run any numbers to figure out where we'd be percentage-wise?
28.7.
Did you get that 28.7%?
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd give us a vastly increased chance. I'm in favor.
Okay, Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would hopefully, give us a better shot at getting the grant. And this is a really big opportunity, so I do think we should push it. I'm also, aware of your point if we're going to be needing more matching funds. So,
Okay, anybody have any last comments on the amendment? Let's do a roll call on that as well, please.
Okay. Kristen Carpenter,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
We didn't quite get that, Tom.
Yes.
thank you, Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Ken Jones,
Yes.
amendment passes 7-0.
Okay, so we are back to the main motion as amended twice. Any further discussion or amendments or comments? Let's go down my list one time here. Jeff Guard on the main motion as amended. Councilmember Guard, any other comments?
No, I said I'm in support of it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Meyer.
Yeah, I support this. I think Breakwater Ave desperately needs that additional parking and that support there for that road and all that parking. I do have a little bit of a concern that it's biting off a little too much to chew, like maybe a little, to me, that breakwater parking bulkhead is what is appealing with all of this. The boardwalk along the harbor there in front of Fish and Game and the Reluctant and going up the sidewalk, the walkability aspect of it, I'm really in favor of. I think we should be trying to get sidewalks as much as possible in this community and just more shoulder way. The floating fuel dock, I've had some reservations in the past about having one in the harbor, but it seems like it's very supported. I do also have some concerns about it being in the entrance, but a lot of the harbor users have really talked out in favor of having it there. But I do have some concerns that maybe that might not be enough parking, and wanting to do commercial or relying on having a fuel dock provider in there to help pay for the match cost of it. That's a little bit of concerning for me. So I just don't want us to be biting off too much to chew and then get this project and then maybe not be able to fulfill it because of material costs and other projects and grants coming down the line. So I am going to be supporting it, but I do have some reservations, but I understand that this is conceptual drawings and hopefully you guys can get it awarded and it will all go smoothly. But I do have some concerns about it being rushed, but some of these things we need to do, and a lot of these things have been talked about for years, so it's not completely out of the blue, but having this grant opportunity and getting this all together kind of is rushed. And then I guess I just want to talk a little bit about the Forest Service and my opinion about that. I think the entire time I've been on council, the Forest Service lease has been brought up and it's been talked about, location of moving, trying to come up with a lease agreements. I believe one or two has come in front of council while I've been here, and it's been always going back to staff, or we do a really short-term lease. I think if we were able to do a full harbor expansion, it would be a little bit different than what we're dealing with now. When we first went out to get all this money for the South Harbor, we were expecting the $30 million to be able to expand the harbor, not just replace the harbor. And so now I feel like we're kind of grabbing at anything that we can to get in some kind of improvement rather than just replacement. But in a lot of ways, it does just feel like a replacement instead of an expansion, and we're just running out of room. So I think we need to rethink how we're configuring things, and I think that's why our eye is on the Forest Service and private dock there is just kind of room in the harbor and trying to work it out. So I really hope that we can all kind of talk together and figure out how we can work together with the state troopers. They have their own dock there too, and I think that we just need to kind of figure out how to fit everything and expand in the same footprint that is already tight. So, but I am going to support it with all that. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, I feel like I've spoken quite a bit on this already. Everybody kind of knows where I stand on this. I'm gonna support it. I think this is a slam dunk for the fleet, and while it is remaining in the same footprint, it is a slight expansion into that corner that is a mud flat right now. And it's a huge improvement in the amenities and services that are going to be offered to the fleet and the infrastructure and the uplands around. Yeah, all this stuff is going to need to be addressed in the future, so might as well get it done now, and the things are going to fulfill most of the bill for us. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I absolutely agree that we need to, or I'm in support of the North Harbor upgrade and investment in general. And I really do think we need a spot for dedicated net mending. I mean, anyone who tries to walk in the harbor in the summer, or even you can't use carts. You can't, it's a hazard for everybody. So I do see the need for a dedicated net mending site. And I also really like the idea of the sidewalk and boardwalk connecting the North and the South Harbor. Like, that's way overdue, and it'll be, huge for walkability for community members, processor workers, and just everyone. So that'll be, I'm excited about that. And I've also heard a lot of feedback over the years about how underpowered our cranes are. I don't use the cranes, but I know they're underpowered. So that seems like a really great addition as well. But I do have a couple questions, I guess. And yes, I know this isn't brand new. This is stuff that's been talked about for a while, but some of the things are a little more new. So I guess one of the things I was wondering about is if businesses besides shoreside or like fuel companies have been approached or contacted regarding like space or commercial use inside the harbor, rather than like, I totally see the utility in having private enterprise assist with the match. I think that's would be a huge win for the city. But I just wondered how much outreach has been done to other businesses in town.
Yeah, we've began some outreach to other fuel providers. That's actually the next agenda item that we'll be discussing.
Not other fuel providers. I mean, I saw that as the next agenda. I meant like just other like entities in town. There's the processors, there's the private, the direct marketing, fisher people in town, who use the docks and would potentially be interested in a dedicated space for their work. Different processors in town use the city docks for their fish loading and offloading. So just wondering what other entities have been approached besides, the fuel dock.
Staff hasn't approached any other entities, but to my knowledge, no other entities have come up consistently in public meetings in the way that a floating fuel dock has.
So the whole notion of that unspecified area by the parking area that will have commercial entities. What's been envisioned is that enterprises that might support the fishing community or the fishing fleet, or might have fishermen who might want to sell things dockside or things like that, that we would create spaces to allow for that. But those specific businesses have not been identified, nor has anyone come forward and said, I need 5,000 square feet of space. And again, I think on the timeline, and one of you can speak to this, it's on the plan, but it's not budgeted for build out. It's just budgeted as space. You want to speak to that, Curtis?
Sure. So the budget includes stubbing out utilities to those spaces, which I imagine in the short term would be used for pop-ups or food trucks, something to that effect. Long term, I think we could probably apply for EDA funds to build it out, and it would offer a pretty good return on investment if the city was leasing that waterfront as other coastal Alaska towns too. I misunderstood your original question and thought you were referring to the area where just the fuel dock was. But
so that uplands work is not, I mean, it's envisioned as an opportunity, but not anything specific. And again, this grant will not build out any storefront.
Okay, yeah, that could just be also another opportunity for match if there was someone that wanted a dedicated spot potentially. I guess, okay, another question that I had was about the timeline, and you did mention that it's probably like 3 years out at this point or so. How long is the environmental permitting that's been done on the South Harbor? How long is that, can that be applied?
5 years.
5 years? And would it have to be expanded to then include, or there'd have to be an additional piece done to include a?
By the fuel provider, everything else is included in the current permitting. The one thing I'd need to check on is the net mending float, since that's a newer addition, but we've had our environmental consultant working on incorporating this concept into our permitting for some months.
Okay, well, I think those were most of my questions and that hadn't been answered. Yeah, I guess in terms of design as well, it'll be interesting to see where we end up. Because yeah, I guess there's concerns about, you know, all the traffic and congestion potentially around the harbor entrance and whatnot. But I agree that the maps that get submitted for the grant, if it could be emphasized that they're conceptual, or or they know. I mean, I guess the grant providers know that they're conceptual, but just for the community, so we're all on the same page, I guess. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Baylor.
Yeah, well, I'll support it, and there's been a lot of good questions asked here. But I would suggest to those that want to pick this apart and make changes, the place to do that would be to start attending these Harbor Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. That's the place to start throwing out your suggestions and ideas, concerns, and probably get answers from those people that are in charge and develop this, especially the Harbor Commission, the main users for this. I think staff and the Harbor and Planning and Zoning put a lot of effort into this, and we start making changes as the whereas. I don't think that's the right way to go about things. I do appreciate the upping the funds to give us a better chance. So I will definitely support this, and I would suggest to everybody that if they have concerns, they start attending these meetings when they do these plans at the Harbor Commission and have those discussions, and I'm sure you will be heard and they will respond. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carpenter.
Thanks. So yeah, we've all seen the email correspondence, I think, about the fuel dock concerns around there, and I anticipate we'll be talking a lot more about that in terms of, I think there's a lot of concern about congestion. You know, why would anybody, except for maybe the tenders, why wouldn't they just use this, which means 500 people at a time lining up, maybe heard, or waiting over the course of a day to get fuel. So that will have to be sorted out. Certainly there are concerns about containment in the case of a spill, or just making sure that they've got precautions. I'm sure that things are way more, that there are a lot more precautions today than there were 20, 30 years ago. So that I look forward to hearing about that. And I hear your concern, Councilmember Meyer, about running out of room, but I also think there are a dozen dozen, maybe more slips that we can't even use right now. So by doing these upgrades, we're going to get some of that capacity back. It's not, I mean, I know we're not moving walls or moving the seawall or anything, but I think we'll get a lot more capacity back out of this, out of the upgrade. So it's a little bit better than a new roof, which looks exactly the same on a house, but yeah. So yeah, I'm in support of the motion.
Councilmember Sherman.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So I'm not going to add too much more other than I just wanted to say that I have been not attending the Harbor Commission meetings or Planning Commission meetings, but I read all the minutes. And this one was a pretty fast pace. The special meeting, I believe, was just last Wednesday or Thursday. And so I did follow up and spoke with the planner and others about some of my concerns with the Forest Service prior to this meeting. And so I think the changes that we made to this resolution are slight in terms, and I meant no offense at all to the Harbor Commission and to their work. And I completely agree that a net mending space needs to be created as a harbor user and someone who pays for slip fees. And I currently don't have electricity either. We need to make some of these improvements. And so I appreciate the work that the Harbor Commission does and the Planning Commission. And I think our changes were very slight. And in some ways, I think the increase of funding should make everyone happy. So, and I look forward to working closer with Harbor Commission and joint meetings. And I hope they can become a regular thing as these harbor plans progress, because I think that's really important. So I am in favor of as it stands now.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have anything new they want to add or questions? Okay, let's take a roll call on the main motion as amended then.
Yeah, main motion as amended. Ann Schaefer?
Yes?
Kristen Carpenter?
Yes.
Ken Jones?
Yes.
Jeff Guard?
Yes.
Melina Meyer?
Yes.
Tom Baylor?
Yes.
Kathy Sherman?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. You guys have more work to do now. Okay, unfinished business, we have none. So new and miscellaneous business. Council direction regarding solicitation of letters of intent for floating fuel dock as part of the PIDP grant application.
Mayor Allison.
Yes, Councilmember Sherman.
I move to direct staff to solicit letters of intent from fuel providers for a floating fuel dock as a part of the 2022 PIDP grant application.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Was there a presentation on this first or?
If you have questions, we can do that. Answer questions.
Okay, we'll start with the maker of the motion, Councilmember Sherman.
I don't have any questions that I haven't gotten answered. And I, for one, would love to have a fuel dock in the harbor so that I don't have to take my meds before we go fuel up.
Okay, Councilmember Schaefer, second.
Yeah, I think most of my questions have been answered. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Jones.
I'm in support. I think I've spoken enough already tonight, but thank you.
All right, thanks for calling in. Councilmember Baylor.
I support it.
Councilmember Carpenter.
Yeah, I support it.
Councilmember Guard.
I'm in support.
And Councilmember Meyer.
Yeah, I think I said my little hesitation on the last one, but I think that it's largely supported, and if that's the plan, we need to get some fuel providers on board and kind of get them in part of the plan, so I'll support it.
Okay, sounds like everybody's in favor of this, so all those in favor of this item, say aye.
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 Oppose? Motion carries. Okay. Next on our agenda is council discussion, sales tax and exemptions. Direction to staff on what we want to do on this, this item. Councilmember Baylor, you've brought this up a few times. You want to start us out?
Wasn't the lease first?
What's that? I missed that.
Did we do the Forest Service lease?
It's not on.
It's not on the agenda for tonight.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was.
Yeah, this is a council discussion on the sales tax and exemptions.
Right. Well, it's been my opinion that we need to capture everything we can from visitors to our community, and that starts with our lodging. Why we would, I don't know if we do, but if we do have a loophole where we can pay for lodging in advance and take care of a cap, we should just not have an exemption for lodging. Same with rental cars and also with the bed and breakfast. These are the folks that we would like to bring money into the community. We'd like to capture that instead of raising property taxes. So that's why I would start with those three items.
Okay, the manager has her hand up.
So I just want to share that in the room here with me are two members of staff, Sheila and Tammy, both of whom are frontline folks dealing with sales tax. And I asked them to be here to, first of all, to answer any questions you might have, but also to identify problems. The memo that is in your board packet on page 49 identifies a few issues that have come up. Owners reporting requirements for businesses that honor the city-issued individual sales tax exemptions, potential misuse of those cards, potential misuse of the $3,000 maximum transaction cap, and businesses that qualify for complete sales tax exemptions. What are the requirements? Those are things that I've heard mentioned, which both Tammy and Sheila can address. And I think from our perspective, and I'm going to let them speak a little bit to some of the issues that have come up, but the code is clear to a certain extent, but there's room for interpretation. And there's two ways of addressing it. One is to change code so that the language is clearer. And the second is to be better educators of what we mean by our existing code. And those are two approaches that could be taken. But if you don't mind, I would like to defer to both Sheila and Tammy to speak a little bit and to answer any questions that you guys have. I know Councilman Baylor has expressed that his concern that there might be money being left at the table. And I'm going to let them address that a little bit. And I'm not sure, Tammy or Sheila, do either one of you no one wants to go first. I'm putting them in the hot seat here.
Hi, this is Tammy, and I'll go first. Tom, how could I first answer which question for you, please?
Well, I hope I'm not someone that has questions here tonight. But so, and it's been brought to our attention a couple of years ago that contractors can come in and secure lots and pay for it in advance, thereby only paying to the cap. Even if they rent lodging for 6 months or 8 months, they're only getting charged for that $3,000 cap. I don't think there should be an exemption for lodging. We should capture all of that. So is that the case? That's the first question.
Okay, that question, there is two tax caps for lodging. There's a short-term caps at 12%. That's for lodging, or the tax we collect on that, the basic 6% sales tax and the extra 6% for a short-term lodging. That's under 30 days. Anything above 30 days is just considered long-term rentals, and so that would be capped at 6%. There really is no current way of knowing who's renting what and what they are presenting as you're saying, as saying that they are renting for 6 months and they're capping it out at that amount as a lease, let's say. Unless we were to change our business licenses or something in order to better specify how they are using their rental facility, just as far as taking in sales taxes as they come as an honor system based on the way that they're being sent. There is not a specific way to know if they are being taxed that way or capped that way.
So why do we even have an exemption for lodging? If I travel up to Anchorage, it doesn't matter how many days I stay there, I pay their taxes, whatever it is. Or if I go to any other community, I pay their taxes. There's no cap for lodging. And these are the people that are coming into the community. That's where we want to capture that from. So that would be my question to the rest of the council.
I don't believe there's an exemption for lodging. It's just whether they get taxed at 12% or 6%. That is the, if you would consider it, exemption, if you will. Whether you're getting taxed because you do a daily rental, which is at 12%, or whether you get taxed as any longer-term rental at 6%. We don't cap at $3,000 for those rentals, and we do collect.
We don't, but what Tom is saying is that we had a property owner come to our council table and tell us that his renters had him give him an invoice for 6 months at a time, so instead of paying tax on $50,000 worth of rent, he was paying tax on $3,500 or whatever the tax cap is. And I don't, I'm not saying staff would even know that. You probably wouldn't.
We wouldn't.
Because they just submit, 35, they pay tax up to $3,500 of it. But that's what Tom is getting at. For lodging and rentals, should that be written into our code that says there is no limit on that? We either need to write it that way or the other way to consider that would be to, say that you gotta, whatever your rate is, that's what the thing is. So if your rate is $2,000 a month, then that's what that tax is. You can't pay for 6 months at a time and get out of the sales tax on it. I think that's what you're getting at, right, Tom?
And can I just interject here?
Exactly.
I want to just interject. Both Tammy and Sheila are to be commended because they are requiring, and I'm going to just turn it over to you because you guys know what you came into and what we have not done over the past many years, and now what we're doing. So I just want them to be clear that we are capturing more tax, and let them explain how we're doing it now.
So some of the ways we're capturing more is following code, is looking to code. We're both new. We're under here barely a year in. Don't know code in and out, not experts by any means, but we're diggers, and so we're learning. We want to do things correctly, and if we don't know the answer, we confer and we dig till we figure out something that we both agree on that think is the right way to go about it. We have collected a lot of sales tax that's been in the rears. We have proceeded to implement, and I think that going forward this last year, have better kept track of information just because there was no real, from our experience, what we could find, information regarding how many business licenses there were, or how, just for our own information, creating our own dialogue that way. But we have captured a lot of sales tax that has been missing to the city by going after them, by phone calls, by writing letters, by being persistent and following code. The same as the exemptions. That's why we are now requiring lists from people, because it is part of our code. It says right in our sales tax, lists should be provided. That was a question brought up from us that How come some people don't and some people do? It should be consistent. Everybody should. So everybody got a letter. We are now going to be requiring this year, or beginning of this year, exemption letters from lists from everybody to be consistent.
When you say from everybody, do you mean from the vendors or from the tax exempt entities?
From the people who are claiming sales tax exemptions. Not everybody qualifies for that.
But technically what she means by everybody is like from the software that we have, what the software recognized as active for the businesses in Cordova. So that could be, anything from like groceries to like nonprofits, youth organizations, religious organizations, anything that the software or as the city deems as an active entity, company that's doing business in Cordova.
And to further answer your question, the entity that reports isn't the person that is claiming the exemption for their organization. It's the entity that's selling. And therein lies the problem, is we are, apparently at one point we offered a 2% discount, if you will, to those businesses to kind of acknowledge that they were having to do work on city's behalf. The liability to businesses to track exemptions and potentially be held accountable for exemptions that we deem should not have been given exists. And I think we need to acknowledge that on the part of businesses. So now Kristen's got her hand going, but
to clarify, so there's the difference between being taxed at 6% and taxed at 12%.
Correct.
And it seems like the 6% folks are just renters.
Yes.
So the difference is somebody who has a business license. I mean, if you're renting a property, I assume you have to have a business license if you're renting.
They all have a business license.
Yeah. And so the question is, do we give those people who have business licenses and are renting property, are we giving them that $3,000 tax break, or are we just going to tax them at 12%? I think that's what are we going to cap it at $3,000?
It's the entity that's providing the service that we ask for the tax from, and they're charging whoever the user is.
Right.
So for a long-term rental place that's over 30 days, they get charged the 6% tax rate as opposed to the daily rate. So that is the only break. We do not offer a $3,000 cap on any rentals.
So how? Okay.
So if it was done in the past, it was done incorrectly, and these gals are going to catch it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question then about that.
Yeah, go ahead, Melina.
Say someone's renting a home in Cordova for $5,000 a month. Isn't it capped at $3,000?
No, it's 6%.
Yes.
So the sales cap doesn't apply for only rentals, but if you bought like an engine, we'll just still use the $5,000, then they're only paying tax on $3,000?
Yes.
I think the difference is, the same with like if you're building a house, you're not going to only get capped on $3,000 of the. Well, I guess building a house, we do have a cap, don't we? Yeah.
Well, you can.
So
You purchase.
You purchase
the permit. You pay for the tax in advance, basically, on the first $3,000 that you intend to spend on your house.
So if someone was going to fuel up and they put $5,000 worth of fuel in there, they're taxed $3,000.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. So the only thing that the sales cap doesn't apply for is lodging?
Well, let me read the code, because this is indeed the case. And let me give an example. Can you make a cumulative purchase? Do gallons of fuel count? No. A sale of fuel at Shoreside should be capped. A kilowatt hours at CCEC, yes. But if you go to the grocery store and buy $4,000 worth of groceries, you don't get to pay tax on just $3,000 because they're individual items, and the code is rather specific around that. Let's see. the fees for sales and services in excess of $3,000 per single purchase transaction. It does not apply to accumulative purchases and those billed as a lump sum in excess of $3,000, except as provided in subsection D relating to sales of construction materials and services. So that's the only time that comes in. So it has to be doesn't apply to accumulative purchases or those billed as a lump sum. So let's say you buy 500 there, 300 here, something over here, something there. Over the course of the month, you get billed once a month and it adds up to more than $3,000. You're still going to get taxed for each of those individual things at the full value. You don't get the exemption. Therein lies the confusion. And I think we see that, and a lot of that could be alleviated by doing some kind of educational campaign, not only with business owners who are providing the tax, but also to the community. But right at the moment, that seems to be where the problems are, right?
Yes.
I have one more question. I'm just wondering, is it worth asking AML what other small communities do, if there's some kind of...
We have a lot of the language that small communities are using. For instance, Nome, over $1,500 is exempt if buying a snow machine or ATV. Very specific. Kotzebue, over $1,000 on ATVs, snow machines, boats, boat motor, car, truck, or SUVs. Period, nothing else. Petersburg, single transaction over $1,200 when all are purchased or delivered at the same time or within a 24-hour period. So the language is varied, but the communities can get very, very specific. When you say buying a snow machine or ATV, that's very specific. And perhaps we need our language to be that specific. I don't know.
I think that we do. I think that would be helpful. I think that's part of it, is that the code that we have is so vague in some ways and is just so interpretable. I mean, if her and I can argue about the same thing and interpret it completely different ways. And it's all about, how it's interpreted, because what is what an itemized list is. Look at a sales receipt from a grocery store. But let's just say you buy some gear and they itemize on that list. You're only coming away with one thing, and it's for this under, over a $3,000 total, and it's capped, but it's an itemized list. So there goes, you can't have an itemized list on one hand, but it is a one single item purchase. It's kind of a confusing issue. So if it was a single thing, meaning a net in its entirety or a engine in its entirety, but the issues that have arose, not so much, those are issues that have arisen, but are what constitute a single purchase.
Right.
What constitute, is it a wedding, and then it's all the stuff that pertains to the wedding, which is a single event or a single purchase? Is it the rebuild of a motor, but it's all the other things that go into the motor? Is that a single purchase? The language is just confusing.
And I do agree with what she says, especially with that specific language. It can be misinterpreted. How I interpret it is different from maybe how a vendor will interpret it. Fees of sales and services in excess of $3,000 per single purchase transaction. How do you define a single purchase transaction? Do you mean a single item purchase transaction? But when you're given that whole example of like a grocery receipt where it does meet that cap because it's over that 3,000, but when you break it down, every single item is itemized. Does that count? Does that meet that cap? My interpretation of it does not. So if you want us, to clearly, go by what the code is, then I do think maybe the language of it needs to be changed, just to be clear. Like, other tax communities tightened their language so there's no loopholes or there's no holes in their crack because they're specific about it. Like Helen says, Nome or Kotzebue, it's $1,500 if it's this. Or Ketchikan or something where it says it will meet this cap if it's done on a certain time. So our code, you can interpret it any other way. And that's what Tammy says as well. We've been bickering back and forth. What is a single purchase transaction? Because if I purchase a net, I do understand it's a single purchase transaction. But if you have a breakdown of what went into that net, then technically it's itemized and it's not a single purchase transaction, even though if you came out with one net.
That's just a good example
Yeah.
of an issue.
Right. So need to find a way to define single purchase for one thing. I mean, I was thinking, could you say one time? Could you say, is there some other way to say that? And
We can provide some language, and if you think this is a direction you guys want to go, we will come back with some recommended language that either other communities are using that is more specific, to give you something to work with in a future work session, in a near future work session, because we'd love to get this resolved. But in the meantime, we are tightening up what we are doing given the existing code. And we are trying to communicate better, and we are going to be hosting a work session to help understand whether the forms that we have actually work and if there's a better way so that businesses feel more comfortable filling them out. But we have had recent situation, and I'll let them describe, where businesses submitted their exemption, the exemptions that they've awarded, and we've said, no, that doesn't count. Then that puts the onus back on the business owner who did not collect the tax to either absorb the tax or go collect it from the individual that should have paid. And that's a tricky one.
I think a lot of that has to do with misunderstanding of or interpretation of the code. They interpret it a certain way, and maybe they don't understand it correctly. So what do? You send an email, you call on the phone, you send the information back to them, you explain to them, you show them the code, you explain to them that this doesn't work as the exemptions that are under our requirements. And to please, we will accept your tax on time, timely, stamp it, not give you any more penalties. We're not trying to do you, any injustice, work with you, but you can amend your sales tax return accordingly. Just know that we can't accept that exemption. Some of the language is also not clear. She'll be a little better able to explain some of this as far as the language in the code regarding what do you do when you get some exemptions that partially fit but aren't quite there? Where lies the crux? What do you do then?
I love the idea of a workshop. I think that's great to help out businesses, and I really appreciate that you are diggers and that you're really diving into this to try to make it as clear as possible. I think that's a huge help. And yes, if you guys could come back with some recommendations for language, that would be great.
Yeah, it sounds like Tom's concern. Hang on just a minute. It sounds like Tom's concerns have probably been addressed, but I think we do need some code changes to come back and, put it in something that you and I can't interpret separately. Put it in terms that are set and nobody can argue about it. Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I really feel like this definitely is going to need a workshop. I've got some ideas on this. I was a little remiss in being prepared for it. The harbor thing sucked up a lot of my oxygen in the room tonight. I would definitely like to have a work session in the near future whenever it works for staff, and would support that. Thanks.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Would it be possible to change the process that would take the burden or the liability off of the vendors when an exemption isn't valid? In terms of, instead of them having to bear that cost or do that follow-up, could the city take that on? I mean, I know that's more staff time, whatever, but.
I mean, those are questions that we could ask. One of the things we talked about is why not let sales tax be collected just as normal from every vendor, and then it's up to the holder of the exemption card to bring it to city, and then we reimburse. That's a possible solution. There's probably a million and one other solutions in there, but this would be something we would bring some ideas about how other communities are doing it, and then workshop that with you guys and decide what direction and what code changes would need to be then made to make that happen. But we are doing the best we can within the limits of interpretation of code, so.
Councilmember Meyer?
When someone does the 3,000 single item tax cap, do they report that on their sales tax?
Yes.
So do you guys have an idea of what type of purchases fall under the 3,000 tax cap? Because we've talked about it a lot, but we don't, boat engines gets brought up, but it's like, how many boat engines are being bought in a year? Is that an exemption that we just put in there? What are some of the actual items that are being, that tax cap is affecting besides fuel?
Which is a good point. Just to kind of bring it up, like there is 74 active resale tax cards that are out there right now. How does one apply for a sales tax card? You have to apply for it. You have to meet certain criteria. So usually those businesses that do have those cards fall under that criteria where they're using parts and pieces for their services, like a food truck or, like a handyman or any of that, situation. But now I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, that resale card, I think, is, just so everyone knows, is that local vendors buy things from local vendors. And because they, as the end provider, are charging sales tax, they get exempted from it. And I think getting back to the whole licensing thing, right? You got it?
Yeah, sorry, now I remember. But there's also a different category, in that, where there's the nonprofits, the federally recognized tribes, government entities, where they are exempt from all of their purchases, whereas that's only 56 that we have on that list. Whereas the 74, it's just bits and pieces that falls under a certain criteria. So it really differs, what that criteria is. But usually nonprofit organizations or federally recognized tribes are capable of showing what those lists that went into that exemption to, whereas a food truck or maybe a handyman could maybe misinterpret that code. I don't really know per se. It just always falls under how does the business owners or vendors interpret that code. Does it coincide, with how us as staff interpret it as well? So where is that common ground? So we don't want to butt heads, like with the vendors. We, like Tammy says, everything is an honor system. It's just an honor system, technically.
But I think to answer more specific of your question, Melina, there's really not a way for us to tell you how many nets are sold, how many inches are sold, how many times we cap that $3,000 off of somebody. Unless you have an auditor that's going to have the time, or an extra special person or a separate person that's going to go through every single tax return, and they're going to scrutinize every detail and make sure that, every item is check that's okay, check that's okay, check that's okay. We won't know the extent of it. That's part of why we're following code so closely and trying to be so diligent, is in making sure that people are following through with that exemption list, because there's really no way for us to have known prior. Now that that's become the norm and we are now enforcing that list requirement, then we can scrutinize every one that's claiming that exemption to see if it meets the criteria.
And I guess I just kind of brought that up because I think that could be maybe a form change rather than a code change of collecting that data, because I think using the tax exempt card, like at the grocery store to buy food for the food truck, stuff that you're reselling, and that's why there's that exemption there, is because the city's collecting tax on that other end, and so that businesses can buy local, support local, but the city's still collecting tax because those goods are being turned into something that is being sold. So I think the exemptions fall under different categories. I think there's the sales cap category that's very specific, and then there's the sales tax exemption for resale of goods, wholesale exemption, which would kind of be the same as the last one I said, and then entities that don't get taxed, like government, churches, those kind of things. So I kind of think there's 3 different types of exemptions that we have. And I kind of think in the filing of sales tax, if that could be just classified in some way. And that way we would collect data, because we did try to raise the sales tax minimum at one point, and then it kind of made it a big deal and it got put on the ballot to get rid of it. But we really didn't know what transactions those were. You know, we didn't know how much that was actually going to collect. We didn't know what type of transactions we were affecting or not affecting, if it was just a very small amount. So we had an idea and presentations and thoughts about it, but there was no clear data on it. But I kind of think that in the sales tax form, maybe we can just start collecting that data, and that could better educate business owners because the form changes.
I think that that's a process that's in work right now. We are working on changing some forms all the way from the beginning, from the business licenses all the way down to the sales tax, and then from the people that are wholly exempt, like the government, native tribes, nonprofits, all those would have their own ways of reporting the revenue in and out, basically so that city council, whoever, can see how much money is exempted, where they report that to the state, or for council members' information, whatever. That's another things we're working on, is some people in the past have just filed 0 because they're exempt. Some people didn't want to give out their numbers, but it states in our code that we need the numbers. So we are enforcing the numbers. And just all around the whole business license, following through with everything as far as making sure people are paying time, and making sure that they're canceling their business licenses when they're no longer in use, making sure that they're filing timely, making sure that we're consistent with everything. We're doing that. We're doing the best we can in those departments, and we're happy to answer any questions and give back feedback as well as we can.
Well, I was just going to say, it sounds to me like we got staff that's on top of it, and that we want to have a workshop. But I would suggest that workshop, we have maybe some specific language that staff can come up with for suggestions, so that we're not swinging in the wind one more time. We've had this discussion 3 or 4 times in the last 6 months, and it always ends up, let's have a discussion about it again. And we need something solid to be discussing. I think if staff could do that at their, at a time certain. I think Tom's biggest concern was that we get a lot of construction projects coming up, and we need to collect the money from these out-of-town contractors that are, we don't want them renting a place for 6 months and only paying the $3,000 cap. We want to, and it sounds like that's already dealt with, but we need to be sure that we're clear, that our code is clear, and that the vendors who are collecting this tax for us as our partner in business know exactly what is expected.
And we don't want to make it hard on, sorry to interrupt you, we don't want to make it hard on the businesses to, in turn, give the city the information that they're requiring either. We respect that. We understand that that's also a process. That's why I do think that, just working with the other businesses that have concerns or how to do it or whatever is a great idea.
And we do have intention of having a work session in the next couple of weeks with local businesses in the chamber. So we'll get some feedback. We want to make sure you have all the information you need as well. So we'll identify the problems from our perspective, from business community perspective, and then have some recommendations for changes. So we don't need to belabor it, but that's where we're at. I just wanted to make sure you understood that we were, I've got a really great A-team here working on it.
Thank you, Sherman.
Yeah, I just was, because Helen, you mentioned this before, that you were going to have a community workshop with businesses in the chamber and everything, and I wanted to just make it clear that that workshop or that forum was different, and you were going to do all that prior to coming back to us, and so that was the point I was just wanted to make.
And we are acknowledging time sensitivity. It is something we are pushing and moving quickly with, so.
Does that sound good to everybody online? Baylor, Jones, Guard?
Yes, it sounds good to me, and that work session with the community and the city manager, that has never happened before to give us good information. So I applaud her for doing that. That's where it needs to start. Get it from the people that are dealing with this every day and give us their suggestions. So great.
Okay, we done with that topic then? Staff got enough direction? Yeah, Councilmember Jones?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff. I do think that we have a great team working on this. And, as a business owner personally, I've been able to help me in the past few months with questions that I've had regarding some of my business dealings and getting my stuff filed and helping me get everything paid up and correct. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate their progress that they're making. And one thing that I would like to see, and I know it's a little bit off topic, but I've been reached out to by multiple community members, and that's the sales tax for the online retailers. And so if that information can be brought forward as well, and as we move into our budget process this fall, having it separated out into its own line item, I think would be very beneficial. Thank you.
And we'll have an quarterly report on the sales tax, online sales tax to date, I hope for the next meeting.
Okay, moving on then to the pending agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Pending agenda. What's up for next meeting?
School board workshop?
Oh, yeah, school board workshop, May 4th, right? School board workshop prior. Anything?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Baylor.
Yeah, number one, if we're going to keep it on, which is fine, we should probably change that to December of 2022.
Yep, I think if we're fiscally responsible for everything, we should know what everything is, at least once.
Even if it's not a site visit, something that like Duncan did with Parks and Rec, where he gave that presentation just about the state of the department, like something like that would be, I think, really helpful for the budget season.
Yeah. The manager will figure out something along those lines, yeah? Anything else? Clerk have anything
Yeah, I
specific?
guess while we're on the topic of site visits, I also think that maybe having council do some ride-alongs to local law enforcement would be a good thing for us to do. I don't know if that's, with the COVID protocols and stuff, that's kind of went away, but I think it's a great idea.
Do they get to carry a badge?
And our
Good idea.
Our police chief is not here today, but I'll make sure he gives a report at the next meeting. He can chat, answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm sure that any council member that wants to go on a ride along with anybody check with Ellen and she'll get you with the right person and sure that they don't mind sharing their duties at all. So anything else on the pending agenda? If anybody has anything specific they think about before the Wednesday prior to the 4th, let us know and we'll try to get it on the agenda. Okay, on to audience participation. Any last minute comments from anybody in the audience? We've dwindled to about half of our original score here. I appreciate y'all coming out. Looks like we have one comment coming.
Just one. I'll get on my sales tax.
Use the microphone.
Name. My sales tax
name.
Soapbox. Mark Froneffel, Shoreside Petroleum, 100 Ocean Dock Road. So, as the #1 collector of probably sales tax in the city of Cordova, I appreciate everybody looking at this. #2, as the person with the most exemptions in sales tax collection, Shoreside Petroleum. Everybody is exempted, heating oil. So every one of those has to be reported every single month. So your form doesn't have enough lines for us. I think there's only about 4 spaces in each form. Hopefully the report that we send works out. But it is onerous on a lot of the bigger companies that I guess the 2 biggest would be us and CEC probably would be the 2 biggest as far as collectors of sales tax. So, it's just something to think about. We'll continue to do it. We continue to learn. Tammy's done a great job teaching everybody about the line items. So that's a good thing, and I appreciate that. So with that, I'll get to work on our proposal for a floating fuel dock. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else? Any comments? Okay, come on up.
So Steve Damage, U.S. Forest Service. So I guess I'd ask Curtis to pull up that photo of the harbor.
This is a microphone.
Do you mind using the mic? We have people on the line.
Yeah, thank you.
You still have that? Are we still connected?
I imagine the one with alternative Forest Service locations.
Mm-hmm.
Three easy steps.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
One-click wonder.
For those of you online, we're trying to pull up a slide here for Forest Service comments. One-click wonder. Wonder if it's going to work. The pictures make it look so easy, huh?
Yeah, they do.
We might be a moment. Do you want to proceed with the agenda and then come back?
Sure, we can go to council comments. Anybody else have? We'll go to council comments and we'll come back to the public comments. So, let me check my list here. Go down one more list. Councilmember Schaefer.
Thanks to all the public input, both email and in person. It's really appreciated. And also big thank you to the staff who presented tonight. Tammy and Sheila, and then Kevin and, oh my gosh, my brain just broke, Curtis. I was gonna say Chris. So thanks for your presentations and answering all our questions. Yeah, so good work, staff, and thanks for everyone that came tonight.
Okay, looks like we got our picture up if you want to come up, Steve, and give us your thoughts.
Sure, thanks, sir. So can I maybe use that mic?
Yeah, you can use mine.
Is that one not working?
Those are on,
Well, it is, but
What's close?
I guess we can try and do it for here. We have a
You
pointer.
I thought it was the mic there.
Do we have a laser pointer? Is that what you're looking?
There we go.
What's a pointer?
Yeah.
Awesome technology. Let's see how this. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. So my comment is really general, and I appreciate the discussion tonight, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of the importance. One of the things I wanted to point out, though. Okay, so right here where the pointer is on the green square, when you take a hard look at the harbor, the space of which we occupy is very small. And the nice thing about the space that we occupy is out of the way. We're out of the way. We're out of the way of the function of the rest of the harbor. So that is an advantage, obviously both to us, but also both to the, to the users of the harbor. So to place us somewhere else with a like situation is challenging. I think it is possible, but it is challenging. So there might have been a little bit of a misrepresentation of the orange squares. Number one, there wasn't agreement that would work. I learned about this Friday night. I did have a chance to meet with the harbor master and planning staff and Curtis on, I'm not even sure what night that was, Monday night. And we kind of talked about some things in general concept. But I still kind of have some concerns. I fully appreciate the commitment, but I think there's still some work to do. And it may turn out that where we are is the best spot for us. And I don't know that has been completely acknowledged. So when you look at the square footage of the harbor, the footprint of which we take up is super small. And the harbor, as you can see, is pretty busy. So coming up with an alternative space that is reasonable or adequate, that also meets everybody's needs, may be a bit challenging. So I just wanted to point that out in generality. So I think that's it for me in closing. So you'll see this again, I'm sure. All right, thank you. You guys have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming and participating, and we will, for sure, I will make an effort to make sure that you guys are invited to future discussions on this issue. Okay, we did Schaefer, Sherman, council comments.
Thank you, and thanks. I'm glad that everybody turned out tonight. It was really helpful. I wanted to thank the staff for the quarterly reports. I was really impressed with all the training that's gone on at the police department. That's pretty amazing. And thanks a lot to Tammy and Sheila. That was a smart move putting them on center stage, Helen. So thanks for that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so sorry, there's kind of an echo. This Forest Service thing, this has been going on for years. We've brought multiple options forward, and it just appears that there's no give. They just want to stay where they are, and I don't blame them. I would love to have priority parking right at the mouth of the harbor too. This is something that the fleet has identified for multiple years. Something the Harbor Commission's been talking about. It's not new. And I really just would urge the parties involved to look at those other options as they are suitable. And there's no reason why we can't fit everybody's needs here and fit in this dock. So I better stop here before I ever draw a moose again. So thanks.
Councilmember Guard, council comments.
First of all, I'd like to thank staff for all the effort. It was much appreciated. And not beating a dead horse on one side or the other on the Forest Service harbor upgrades issues. It's just a really good example of why we need to make sure we get all user groups involved in all of our planning as we go through stuff. I understand that this was a rush job with the proposal schedule for this, and things need to move ahead, but we need to make sure that all user groups are represented through the whole process when we do things like this. Not saying necessarily this one and only this one, but it just makes things a lot smoother. We don't end up like we did. So anyway, that's my sense.
Thank you. Councilmember Carpenter.
Thanks. I echo comments that have already been made. People are making some great points. And I also want to just say I'm super appreciative of Tom Carpenter being willing to serve on the Board of Fish. I think that's going to be a huge help for Cordova. It's a big time commitment, and I think it'll really be to our advantage. So that's great that we have a chance at having a Cordova voice on the Board of Fish. We've seen it in our packet, and I thought I would just mention it for people who might be listening in on YouTube about the special election. You know, we're voting to fill Don Young's seat temporarily, and then we vote again on that in November, and then we also vote for the primary for a Senate seat and the House seat in the August primary, and vote again in the general. And with regard to the harbor and where the Forest Service has space, I think that's what we pay engineers for too, is to help us figure out some of these scenarios. And they're the ones who can do the measuring and rejiggering and come up with some different scenarios. So I look forward to seeing some creative ideas from those folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Meyer.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Everybody said everything, and I talked a lot tonight, so thanks.
Councilmember Baylor, or Vice Mayor Baylor.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of the comments that were made, and I really appreciate the work that's being done on the sales cap. Having been a user of that for over 40 years, and probably one of the few businesses that have been audited over that issue with no problems, I might add. It is a very easy system to abuse. It is an honor system, and we're running a city at a deficit on our budget. We've got projects coming up. I think we need to look at all the ways we can to recoup some of those funds without raising property tax. So I appreciate their efforts, and I hope they can clean things up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming to the meeting tonight and participating. It's a lot easier to do this job up here when we get public comments. So trust me on that one. So one more item.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and second to adjourn. No objection. We will be adjourned.